Welcome to Sid and Malcolm, heard exclusively on malcolmpresents.com, which is a internet streaming platform with all the new shows that you ever want to hear. It's on malcolmpresents.com. Anyway, greetings, Sid. You were talking about divine intervention.
You know what? I've had times in my life when I just think like a gentle stroke of God's hand on my shoulder or pushing me towards something. And I had something that happened yesterday that showed me that there is leadership that is out there that I have no control over, but I just accept it for what it is. And the only words I could use is divine intervention. And I could tell you, I have written this up, but I'd rather describe it because it'll, a lot of the nuances I don't think I could put into writing. So yesterday morning, about 8:30, I'd already picked up food from Costco and I was leaving the Costco parking lot. Between 8 and 10, I do food recovery 7 days a week. And I get a phone call. My friend Bruce Becker, who is a friend of mine, 25 years, has been active in Rock and Wrap It Up. He and his brother own a very successful ice cream factory called Max and Minna's. And he has one retail store in Queens, in Kew Gardens on Main Street. But most of his work is done through a contract that he has with Ralph Lauren's daughter, Dylan Lauren. And she has a national chain of candy bars called Dylan's Candy Bars. They're all over the country. And Max and Minna's ice cream is their signature ice cream. So Bruce calls me. He is in his store early and said, Sid, I would love for you, I know it's short notice, to come to a birthday party I'm throwing this afternoon. And I said, who's it for? He says, well, you remember I'm a mentor to a man who is mentally challenged. He lives in a group home in Brooklyn and it's his birthday today. And I'd like to make him a little ice cream party. And I'd love you and Diane to come. And I said, Bruce, let me speak to Diane, but I think we could do it. And I said, by the way, you know, what kind of gifts does he like? Does he like anything in particular? And he said, Sid, he collects everything. Mm-hmm. I said, that's fabulous because I have everything. I have a signed football from a former New York Football Giant defensive player named Janoris Jenkins, who was traded to the New Orleans Saints. And the Giants had a number of footballs that he had signed that really did not have value anymore to them. So they gave them to Rock and Wrap It Up to give away at the holiday time. And I gave away the majority of them this past December. But I knew I had one. And I said to Bruce, would he like a signed football? He said, oh my God, he would cherish it. And I said, I'm going to bring it. And after Bruce hung up and he said, you know, to be there after 2, there was a rabbi that he wanted me to meet that was also doing tzedakah work. And he thought that he should speak to me and I him. Maybe we would have some synergy together. I said, that'd be wonderful. And I got home, I spoke to Diane. She said, let's do it. It sounds like a fun thing to do and a nice thing to do. And I said, you know, we just gave away socks to the homeless and we had a half dozen pair of Bombas socks. And I said, I'm going to throw it into the gift bag because he's at a group facility. This could be something that he needs every day. So that's what we did. So we then got in the car and we got there about 2:30. It's about a half-hour drive for us. And we parked right outside of the ice cream store. We walk in and there's a half dozen people already. There was a man and a woman, Orthodox looking, sitting on benches as you walked in. And then I recognized the young man who I'd met 4 years ago, Tuvia. And Tuvia sees me, he gets very excited. He hugs me. "Oh my God, Sid, I'm so glad you came to my birthday party." And it was great. And the store was nicely decorated. Bruce had put up some balloons and put up some signs for Tuvia. And there were some other younger people there. Tuvia was turning 42. There were some people there in their 30s. And we just started, talking what you've been doing. Tuvia, what ice cream are you going to eat today? Are you going to have more than one ice cream? I said, yes, it's my birthday. I'm going to have 2 or 3 different ice creams. They said, that's amazing. I said, I think I'm going to have extra ice cream too today for your birthday. And he was excited. All of a sudden, Diane comes over to me. She was standing by the couple that had come in. She said, you have to come by and meet this couple. The guy was dressed, he was wearing a Russian winter hat, long beard. His wife looked like she was a Rebbitzin. She looked frum. And I said, okay. She says, he says his name is Rabbi Chesed Halberstam. I turned white and I go over to her. And now I'm going to go back 28 years to 1995, 27 years. In 1995, in January of 1995, I was at a party at my mother's birthday. And I said to my father, I said, Dad, coming April, May is going to be the 50th anniversary of you being liberated. I would love to go back to Poland and see where you were born. My mother already is, listening from a side ear and says, no, he can't go back. It's not something that he should be doing. At which point my father said, Sid, that sounds like a great idea. Could you set it up? I said, Dad, absolutely. And my mother's a little pissed at me, but she didn't want to go. That was what the story was, because she also had a very bad Holocaust experience in Europe, and they put everything behind them at this point and had been in America since 1950, but lost so many people and such horrific experiences that she didn't want to relive any of it.
Yeah, the memories were too hard
for her, not my father. And over the next 2 months, I reached out to both of my sisters, to my nieces and nephews, and it turned out that one of my sisters, my sister Sherry, said that she could take time off to go. My sister Gladys couldn't, because she had a husband who was suffering from MS. And she really had, anytime she wasn't working, she worked for Ernst & Young, she was really home with the younger kids and my brother-in-law. And my daughter Barry was already away in college. She was at Stanford. She was in her 2nd year. But my daughter Jill was a senior at Lawrence High School and had already gotten in early to Cooper Union. So she was all set and she could take time off in her senior year and nothing would have really been out. So I make all the reservations and we go. My father, my sister, and my daughter. And on the airplane ride going over there, I see my sister was like depressed. And I went, and I'm very close to my little sister. I went over to her and said, look, I know it's not easy doing this, but you have to have an entirely different mindset. We're going there to celebrate Daddy's living,
right?
Not to, we can pray for those that died, but this is about us. He survived, we're here, you're here, my daughter's here. Had Daddy not lived, we wouldn't be here. This is celebration. And she looked at me, she said, you're absolutely right. Everything changed right there. And the rest of the trip was celebratory. We hired limousines. We went to the best restaurants. We paid to go see, it was a lot of money in Polish money, $10 to see the Bolshoi Ballet, which was in Warsaw when we were there. And we saw the country. Sadly, of course, we went to Auschwitz. We davened to all of our family members that were murdered there. We went to see my dad's hometown on a Sunday. Monday morning, we were in Krakow, and we had heard about this sector, was a Jewish sector called Kazimierz. Kazimierz was 700 years old, and it was named from King Caspar of 1300 in Poland, who had a Jewish wife named Esther. And a lot of the streets in Krakow are called Estera, named after Queen Esther. Nothing to do with Purim, by the way. We are in the town of Kazimierz, and there was an old synagogue there. And my father said, "Oh my God, my brothers and I prayed in the synagogue. Two of my brothers lived in Kazimierz from 1930 until 1939.
Wow.
And I would come visit them, and we prayed here." I said, "Dad, that's unbelievable." And we go into the synagogue, and it was open. It was around 9 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And the first people we see, completely unexpected, were these two Hasidic men, full beards, hats. And they said to us, and they said, "They read Yiddish?" I go, "Yes, I speak Yiddish. We need 2 for a minyan because our father-in-law is saying Kaddish for his late wife." And we said, "We would love to help you with the minyan." So my father and I go on, we put up talis. We already had yarmulkes because we had traveled around to Auschwitz. Well, we do the minyan, and they somehow cobbled together 10 people, which was amazing since I didn't know if there was any Jews in this town. And we're like talking after the minyan, and the 2 men, I say to them, "You know, what are you doing here?" He says, "Well, from Israel, and our father-in-law wanted to see the town that he was from. You know, there's 10,000 towns in Poland. And we wanted to sightsee here in Kazimierz. And then we're taking a tour to his town." I said, "What town was it?" "Oh, the town of Stakova." I said, "Stakova? My father's from Stakova, and we were there yesterday." Well, right away, there is some intervention taking place, because had we been a half hour later, which we could have been because the girls weren't ready, they came a little bit late, and had we gone to another shul first, which we were going to do afterwards, we never would have been involved in this particular moment in time in Ramu with these 2 men. And all of a sudden, my father says to them, "My grandfather was the gabbo, the assistant to the rabbi in the town. And the rabbi in the town was Rabbi Jacob Halberstam. And my grandfather was his gabbo. And I even went to his son Naphtali's bris." And with that, the men are physically shaking. The older father-in-law comes over and goes to my father, "Ich bin Naphtali."
See?
Here, my father has not seen him since 1935, when he was 4 years old or 5 years old. And here is Naphtali Halberstam, the son of the rabbi that our family was the gabba to. And the Halberstams left that town and went to Israel because the Polish government encouraged all rabbis to leave, knowing the anti-Semitism that was coming.
I expect to see Rod Serling coming out soon with the music.
Let me tell you how freaky this now gets. We now are blanched. We hug each other. They start, talking about, life over the last, we spent about a half hour just going through this, and we told them about the town of what had happened. And after they had left, there was a terrible tragedy. My father's first cousin, who was the same age as him at the time, in 1942, he was hung for stealing butter for the family. And the whole town had to watch the hanging of him and a half dozen men that were Polish partisans that were fighting the Nazis. The whole town had to come together to watch this hanging. And our cousin Aaron Mandelbaum. Because he was the smallest one, they hung him first. He was on a barrel, and they kicked the barrel, and as they kicked the barrel, he yelled out, he had a hood on his head. He yelled out, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu, so that his family would know which body was his. And
so translate that into English.
Shema Yisrael, God of Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, I am here. And my mother, who had not met my father yet, had to watch this hanging January 15th, 1942. And my mother still remembers how horrible it was seeing all of these men hung.
I just said not to trivialize it, but you should speak to Spielberg about doing a movie on that. That would be so dramatic.
Spielberg already has done my stuff. I gave him his documentary project that he did, and he did a good job with it. So now we separate, and my sister and my daughter are just, glowing. And my father and I, we felt the glow of God's hand that we couldn't ever describe to anyone, because here was a man that Dad knew, hadn't seen in 60 years, met him by accident, and was one of the most famous rabbinic families in all of Europe, the Halberstam families. There were dozens of Halberstam rabbis.
Well, was that the guy that he went to his bris also?
Yes. So this was Naftali Halberstam, Rabbi Naftali Halberstam now, and my dad had gone to his bris, and he hadn't seen him in 60 years. So now we leave. We have a great rest of the trip. We tell everybody this story about meeting Naftali, and it becomes part of the Mandelbaum life and legacy.
Was that the trip to Israel where you were standing by the Wailing Wall and you and your father?
And that's when I had that epiphany. This was actually 14 years later.
Oh, 14 years, okay.
Right. So now it's yesterday. I am here in this ice cream store because I wanted to help celebrate this Tuvia. And my wife comes over to me and says that there is a named Rabbi Chesed Halberstam over there. And I said, there are hundreds of Halberstams. I go over to him. Hi, how are you doing, Rabbi? He said, oh, call me Chesed. I shake his hand. Chesed, how are you? I said, I have to tell you a Halberstam story. And I quickly retell the story about meeting this son of Jacob Halberstam, the town's rabbi, of which my grandfather was the Gabba to. And this guy turns white, and he said, Naftali Halberstam is my grandfather. And he died 2 years ago at 92. And at that point, we hugged each other because this was a divine moment of all the people. And by the way, I didn't know he was going to be there. And what brought him there was even eerier. He happened to have been Tuvia's uncle. And I knew Tuvia for 4 years. I never asked him his last name, which was Halberstam. And we just kind of took in what had just happened. And I got the same feeling of divine intervention, God's hand on both of our shoulders, and my wife and his wife all together at this moment to have this kind of, it's not even a coincidence, it's a bashert moment. It's like a prescribed moment that has happened that you have no control over. It's bashert, it happens because of God.
Yeah, it's why bashert is Yiddish for it's meant to be.
And there were a million reasons why I didn't have to go to that birthday party yesterday. There were a million times I could have gotten there and missed this guy because he was leaving he was helping a younger man learn Torah. So he was there for a prescribed period of time, about 30 minutes. And I got there 15 minutes into his, 30 minutes. And that my wife somehow heard the last name, and it was in some kind of conversation. And that's where I had something that was divine. And there's no other way to describe it. I took it, Malcolm, as a gift from God. It was a gift to me. Well, the reason God felt, Sid, you don't need anything in life, which is true. I don't need anything material. I don't think you need anything at this point material in life. But to have this happen after 28 years of the first one happening with my father, this was almost like a legacy that it had to happen. And I had to be part of that moment with my wife there and with Bruce Becker there, who put it all together to have this party for Tuvia. Had he not made this party and gone out of his way of having this ice cream party for this challenged, young man, Tuvia, they say the stars lined up. Well, this was every constellation in the world lined up for me and for Chesed to be there at the same moment.
Well, it's that connection that you have with the old world, with Poland, with your dad's relatives.
Yeah. This all comes from that. And, feeding people now, all the rock stars that have met us and, are part of what we do. But then there was a tragedy because his wife was his second wife. And she told my wife, yesterday, the day before, so it was Sunday, was our 28th anniversary of the death of our son, of Chesed's son. And I remember that death because it was all over the world. In 1994, a bus full of students, 14, 15-year-olds, had gone to pray for Rabbi Menachem Schneerson of the Lubavitcher sect.
He was from Brooklyn, right, Schneerson?
And he was having some minor surgery. So thousands of kids who knew of him went to pray for him at the hospital that he was in. On the way back on the Brooklyn Bridge, some maniac terrorist saw a van full of Orthodox kids with payas and opened fire.
Wow.
And
I don't remember that.
Oh, you could take a look, and killed Ari Halberstam. And that was his son, who's dead now, would have been in his late 30s at this point, or early 40s. And we in Brooklyn know this. But the reality was that Bruce Becker has a love of the Rebbe, and he reads a lot of books about the Rebbe. And Bruce is modern Orthodox. He's not Lubavitch. And the Rebbe affected his life in many ways. And I have a feeling it was that connection that brought him to Tuvia, because Tuvia's uncle, the Halberstam that I met, Chesed, I did research on last night. He was an assistant in the house of Rebbe Schneerson.
Wow.
And his son Ari would come to the house, and Rabbi Schneerson would teach him his Aleph Bet, his Hebrew alphabet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sort of, I grew up Jewish, but very loosely. I'm culturally Jewish, not religiously. But there's I think it's two books that I read by Chaim Potag.
Sure. The Chosen.
The Chosen and In the Beginning.
Okay.
And that's my favorite line with the people. In the beginning, all things are difficult. I think that's the opening line of the book. But it gives you sort of a rundown of the Hasidic, Hasidic religion.
Yeah.
The Jews who practice that. I think, in fact,
Well,
Robert Benson, I think
that is my background. So we were brought up, in Poland, Hasidic, and Rabbi Halberstam was from one of the families, rabbinical families, I think the Bova families, that came apart through the mysticism of the 17th century. In fact, when my wife and I went to Prague, we went to the house that supposedly was where Golem was, the monster that was in Jewish lore and fantasy.
Yeah, folklore, right?
Folklore, and we went to that shul, and we saw where he supposedly, this Golem, lived.
Mm.
And we went to many of the museums in Budapest and Prague, Jewish museums, that spoke about the different sects. And the Halberstam sect is a very famous one. It's still here in this country. David Halberstam, the writer, won a Pulitzer Prize for a book on Vietnam.
Here's an English pronunciation, Halberstam, right?
Halberstam.
Yeah, okay.
And he wrote a Pulitzer book called The Best and the Brightest about Vietnam in 1970.
Yeah, I think I read that book. Yeah.
Yeah, most of us read it then. And that's Chesed's, Halberstam's cousin, David Halberstam. And Chesed said to me that when he's in English situations, he uses the name David. So he's another David Halberstam.
Is he still alive? Or
I don't know. He would probably be in his 80s now. Chesed is 70. So he's a couple of years, I'll be 72. He's a couple of years younger than us, younger than me. But it was, one of those days, and I wrote a whole piece, which I'm going to send you. And I have a photograph of Chesed and Tuvia and Bruce Becker. And Bruce Becker's father came to the celebration. Diane took this great picture. And I'll send you a copy, and I'll send you this chapter in my book, which I call The Miracle in Max and Menace. And I've already sent it out to hundreds of people that read my writing. And I got amazing response to it. One of my good friends was the assistant to Elie Wiesel for many, many years, Martha Hauptman. I lived in her home when I had to live in Boston, and we couldn't sell our house and see to her. So Elie Wiesel arranged for me to live with her. Her kids had already gone out to college, and she was divorced, and she let me rent a room from her. I was at Harvard at the Center for Blood Research for some years, and I managed a division of ortho up there. Well, I'm in touch still with Martha, and Martha read it and just said, Elie would have been blown away by this, which was amazing. So I wanted to share that. I thought that was worth.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a true.
That was worth a half hour.
It's something that cannot be explained in reality.
No, and it's in context of my life. When I say I really felt this was a gift given to me, I really felt that, Malcolm. It was like I said, I am humbled that God gave me this experience with Chesed, being there at the same time I was there at that moment. The same thing that I felt when my father felt when he met Naftali in the Ramu synagogue in 1995, that shouldn't have happened either mathematically, but there is a symmetry in the universe that sometimes shows itself, and that Naftali was there at that moment, and his son-in-laws were outside talking to us and asked us, like, our reward for being in the minyan was having Naftali come out, because we didn't have to talk to his son-in-laws. We could have been in the minyan and we could have left. Or something said to us.
Or you could have said, I don't have the time for it right now. Sorry.
But, we did that. And the gift of being in the minyan for him was Naftali and my father meeting and sharing this amazing life of 60 years before that.
Well, anyway, Sid, it's a marvelous story, but what I hate to tell you is our time is up.
Oh my God.
But
that's amazing. That went pretty quickly, Malcolm.
It's a great story. Well, I like to make, you should get a collection of short stories, not necessarily one novel.
Well, I have that. I have a book I've written. Yeah, it's called A Folio of Wild Poetry and Prose. Wild with a Y for my name.
Do you have that in hard copy by any chance?
I don't. My first book, The Hunger Manifesto, is available at Amazon online for $4.99.
Oh, okay.
And that you could download, and you could all make donations to us at rockandwrapitup.org, 1-877-691-FOOD, if you want to call us. But next week will be a difficult week for me. My daughter's flying in Thursday night with my grandkids, and I'm going to be with her next week. So let's skip a week, and we'll see the week after that.
Well, I'm going to skip a week. I'd love to have your daughter on and have her join you. Not going to happen.
My daughter's coming is a very interesting thing. I know you don't have time now, but
okay, let's go in after. Okay, so you want to skip a week?
Yeah, we'll skip a week. My daughter was a circus performer. Did I ever tell you this? Maybe not.
I don't think so. I have to go back through the old shows.
So she's actually coming in Saturday to do a panel discussion of women in the circus. And her partner, and she was in the circus from 96 to 2002. And they had an international group called the Pain Proof Rubber Girls, Ula and Sharka. And they performed all over the world. And they also were the headliner of the Sideshow in Coney Island. And they're going to talk about that experience. And her partner lives in South Wales, Australia. So she's going to Zoom in Ula, Jill is Sharka. So Ula is Amanda Topaz. She's going to Zoom in for the panel discussion. And Jill's going to be there to answer questions with some other circus performers, women. Yeah. And my daughter was one of the first circus performers that did contortion. She did this in 1995 and was a contortionist. I may have mentioned that she did a fabulous, fabulous performance for Ornette Coleman, the famous jazz player.
I think you might have mentioned it briefly. It wasn't.
Yeah. So
anyway, Sid, we have to run.
Take care, Malcolm. This was great.
Speak to you later. Send my love to your daughter, even though I don't know her, but I know her dad.
Thanks. Vaya con Dios.